Okay, so shifting gears here, we have about 10 minutes left, and we can go over some of the questions asked. We still have a number of attendees present, so if you do have more questions, either about any of the material you saw today or anything you want to see in the future, we would really encourage you to take the opportunity to ask. I want to take this opportunity also to say that we will have an end of webinar survey that we will send to you later, and we would really appreciate your feedback on how the webinar was run and what you would like to see in the future. So please keep an eye on that as we prepare that survey.
So no questions, because everything is answered. Everything is ready to write his own BART tools.
Maybe if you have a chance, maybe someone could comment, is this level of information enough to get started, or do you still feel like you're a little bit lost on how to modify the C code itself? Okay, and there are a couple questions we can take live. Okay.
Okay, does it make sense to test new tools using old tools? Because if the old tools break, the test might be meaningless, I guess. Well, that's a possibility that you basically break both tools in the same way so that the test fails to detect this error. But that's relatively unlikely. You usually build like the test in new, more complicated tools by using like basic tools in the tests, and the basic tools have a lot of independent tests. So that's very unlikely that these break. So it's basically checking consistency a lot between different tools, and this gives a relatively robust testing environment. So you usually try to like also have this, so we not only have these system tests which run the tools, but we also have the unit tests which basically test basic functions. And so at least the basic functionality is also tested using these unit tests. And so we are pretty confident that those basic tools do not break.
Let me add another comment on that. I think one of the worries is that as you add new tools, if the old tools change functionality, they don't necessarily take that into account that your new program required that functionality. So ultimately, we would really welcome these new tools that have a general utility outside of just your specific application to be incorporated into BART, and eventually those tests will be a part of it, so that a new tool cannot break an old tool, and an old tool cannot be modified because it will fail the new test. And so you can actually see that kind of workflow all the time. A lot of the reference implementations actually are integrated upstream into BART and then added as part of the default package. Okay, there's a question about some error compiling on Mac on the latest OS. So these kind of questions are better answered on the mailing list if you can provide as much information as possible, and then one of us can test it out. Okay, there's a question about BART and Gadgetron, and I think more generally how BART can be used with other tools. Are they actively supported in either community? I think that in the past, Gadgetron developers have supported the BART gadget, and it's possible that that's not working as it was originally, and that's actually kind of an example of the situation where new tools are being added by other people, but they're not being added upstream. So that's something that we're aware of. There's some discussion on the mailing list if you take a look, and hopefully we can get a little bit more synergy between those two really helpful and useful reconstruction tools. And then there's a question about MATLAB Python instead of passing by disk, if we've investigated standard in, standard out. I'm not sure exactly if this answers the question, but we do have some experimental branches that have memory mapped files so that they don't pass by disk at all, but they're not quite finished. So if you also have general questions or comments on feedback about the webinar, not necessarily BART itself, we would also be happy to hear that. Okay, a few minutes remaining. Any last comments or thoughts from any of the panelists before we wrap up?
I just thank you all the panelists and all the presenters and all the participants for joining, and we'll be really appreciative if you could fill in our survey. It will give us a lot of input of how we did and what we should do in the future. And then please stay tuned for next workshops.
Yeah, thanks very much for attending. We really enjoyed putting this together. And I really want to thank the panelists and presenters. I know it's a lot of work. And thanks attendees for sticking around regardless of the time zone you're in. If you are interested in actually contributing back, we would really welcome that. You can take a look at the source code, you can participate in the mailing list, and you can also use GitHub as a platform for that too. And as I mentioned yesterday, there actually are a number of public contributions to the code base, and you can see that directly in the commits. Okay, some questions about watching the webinars again. So they are being recorded. We do plan to distribute it, but we'll need a little bit of time to set that up. Okay, one other question related to CUDA. So in all of these demos, we didn't really show the GPU functionality. That's another topic that we would like to touch on in the future. But there are instructions and examples of how to run GPU code as well.
Yeah, in general, I think we covered only a small part of the features BART has. So there are a lot of things we haven't shown and which you can do, and we hope we can present this in the future.
Okay, so let's wrap up here. Again, thanks everyone for joining. Stick around, or rather, look in your inboxes a little bit later for a survey. We'd really appreciate the feedback you have to help us run these smoother in the future and also know what to focus on. So thanks again for attending, and thanks to all of the presenters.
Okay. Have a nice morning, afternoon, evening.
Evening and good night. Yeah.
Good night, and see you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks.